Okay, good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of council for Monday, November 29th, 2021. We're going immediately into a closed session. A motion to go into closed session is required. If I can have a mover, moved by Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Kushner. It's a property matter, acquisition, disposal, and disposal. It's bylaw 221, 124, section H31C, a proposed or pending acquisition, disposition of land by the municipality or local board, 320 Geneva Street, Realty File 20056. By attending the closed session, each member acknowledges that their obligations under the Code of Conduct, including responsibilities related to the confidentiality of closed session materials and discussions, remain the same as if they were physically present in the meeting. This includes members who are not permitted to record the proceedings and must ensure that no other person can hear or see any of the confidential deliberations taking place. So we've already had a mover and a seconder. All in favor, go in camera. Looking on screen, that's carried. So now we can go in camera. We started a little later than expected, so I apologize for folks who have been patiently waiting at home. And we are going to start the regular meeting of council. We'll do O Canada, and then we'll do the land acknowledgement from Deputy Mayor Garcia. So we'll start with O Canada.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras s'est porté le pays, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
All right, Deputy Mayor Garcia for the land acknowledgement. Deputy Mayor Garcia for land acknowledgement.
Good evening. Welcome to council.
Councillor Garcia, you're up for the land acknowledgement. Councillor Garcia, can you hear us? Councillor Garcia, are you able? Technology today. Can you hear us?
Yes. Oh, yes, I can.
Okay, waiting for your land acknowledgement.
Okay, thank you. I did not hear you say that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We acknowledge that the land on which council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Acknowledging this is a reminder that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Garcia. I just have a couple of things for the mayor's report. I just want to wish everyone in our Jewish community happy Hanukkah. Yesterday was the start of the Festival of Lights with the lighting of the menorah. I was pleased to be at Brock University this evening, and that was around 5 o'clock for the lighting of the second light at Brock University with Rabbi Zaltzman. And I was there with President Lynn Wells as well. And there will be on December 6th at 6 p.m. a special meeting of council to consider the regionalization of transit. Niagara Regional Councillors voted last week to move forward with consolidation of transit with a 25-to-1 vote, following considerable and thoughtful discussion, overwhelming community support, delegations, and correspondence. Residents wishing to learn more about the proposal can visit movingtransitforward.ca. The vaccine clinics are opening up across the region for children ages 5 through 11. Niagara Region Public Health are hosting vaccine clinics throughout the region. St. Catharines is not hosting one until December 14th, but I've asked Public Health to move up that date. We have been working with a couple of locations here in St. Catharines that I think provide the space for both Public Health and parents to be able to bring their children to these locations. So if you do have questions, and if parents or guardians have questions about the children receiving COVID-19, we encourage you to reach out to medical professionals or Public Health. Also like to say congratulations to Team STC on earning the prestigious National Award for the Community Improvement Plan at the 2021 Brownie Awards. A special shout out to Margaret Josiopovic, Bruce Bellows, Director Kite, and Director York for leading this, along with other staff from planning, finance, and other departments. I also want to thank Council for voting for the approval of this plan. It was the 2021 or the 2020 CIP that got approved, and again putting St. Catharines on the map and welcoming new investments to our community that will continue to contribute to the growth of St. Catharines. Also, number one is Culture Days in St. Catharines was ranked number one in Canada, and that was the second year in a row with over 192 activities. So I want to thank our city's culture staff and all of our partners in the arts community for helping to make a month-long activities for Culture Days something to celebrate, and we earned the number one spot again. Let It Go, Let It Glow, the holiday celebration will begin on December 11th through January 9th. This is the Downtown Association. We'll be working with both the City of St. Catharines and also the Port Dalhousie area will be working with a kickoff on December 11th in the downtown core, December 18th at Lock One Commons in Port Dalhousie. For more information, visit lovestc.ca. We also have the launch of a new website. It's an awesome new website for the City of St. Catharines. Check out stcatharines.ca. A new mobile-friendly website has been launched. I want to thank our city's corporate communications team for all its hard work to get this up and running. It was a lot of effort behind it. Also, congratulations to the St. Catharines Art Award winners, Curtis Ty, Elise Nacarado, Peter Shea, Jean Bridge, and Operg at Brock University for all of their awards at the St. Catharines Arts Awards, which was held last week. As well, the Great Holiday Food Drive is Friday, December 10th at Market Square, and I just want to encourage our community to come out and make food or monetary donations at Market Square. You can come out the entire day, and we'll be looking forward to seeing a lot of people coming out to support members of our community. Special shout out to Bell Media's 610 CKTB, Move 105.7 and 97.7 Hits FM for their support of the Community Care St. Catharines, the World Holiday, Great Holiday Food Drive, as well as our Transit Commission for their support as well. We have two bowlers that have been into the Worlds. I want to say congratulations to Sarah Clausen, who won a bronze in the ladies singles, and Lisa Marbito, who won a silver in the women's team event. And they were at the International Bowling Federation's Masters World Championship in Dubai. So congratulations to them. And the Mega TV Rotary Auction is coming up December 2nd through 4th, and it'll be available online. It's the Mega Rotary TV Auction.ca. Great opportunity for supporting local businesses and helping out Rotary in our community. And finally, I just want to say congratulations to all the award recipients in the Women in Business Awards, which is held by the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. Special congratulations to Carolyn Watts, the plant manager for GM, who just retired. She worked at GM her entire career, and she was a trailblazer in automotive manufacturing, and also for her support in women in STEM careers. So I just want to say congratulations to her and all the other winners for the Women in Business Achievement Awards. And with that, I'll turn it over to the clerk for the adoption of the agenda.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this evening's in your Sugar Sink folder this evening, councillors, you have a memorandum from the Manager of Programs and Culture Services regarding recreation programming updates. You have additional correspondence regarding the public meeting for 36 The Cedars, which is also in Sugar Sink. The following amendments have been made to this evening's agenda. Item 8.3 in clause 2, the bylaw reference it references bylaw 2014-157. That should be the reference, not bylaw 2014-57. Amendment to item 11.1, update of next steps for fallen firefighters memorial. The financial implications section of the report should state, the fundraising campaign for the Fallen Firefighters Memorial has not yet started and will be launching in early December. Amendment to number 8.2, revision to conditions of the draft plan of subdivision approval, subject lands 49 Ridley Road in Appendix 3. The subdivision agreement is labeled as Category 1. It should be labeled as Category 2, and all categories that follow should also be one number higher, and that's it.
Any additions to the agenda? Can I have a mover for the agenda? Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Phillips. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. We have to now do the motion arising from closed session, which was 2.1, Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, and this is just closing off the discussion that we had prior to the open meeting of council, which was the in-camera meeting. So we do have a motion on the floor, moved by, I believe, Councillor Townsend, seconded by Councillor Phillips, and I'll look to the clerk to call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, adoption of the minutes. We have a motion that council adopt the minutes of the meeting of council, which was the budget, Monday, November 8th, and that council adopt the minutes of the meeting of council held on Monday, November 15th, and then we had another budget meeting on November 17th, and those minutes are included as well. So any changes to the minutes? Seeing none, as a group, I need a motion. Councillor Porter, seconded by Councillor Kushner. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, now we head off into any conflicts of interest. I don't believe there are any on this agenda. And now we'll be moving into items for consent. So nothing has been pulled from consent. Oop, Councillor Littleton.
Thank you. I'd like to pull, and we have a motion for this. It's number 4 under correspondence in 8.5. Thank you.
Number 4, 8.5 under correspondence. We have that lifted. Okay.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, my apologies.
Councillor Cisco.
Declaration of interest item, I believe it's 8.1. I forwarded to the clerk's office. It's a pecuniary interest relating to a family member.
Okay, so that's 8.1. Yeah, so you've already sent an email in, so that's fine. Okay, seeing no other one, I'll turn it over to the clerk for the consent agenda.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this evening's consent agenda, item 8.1, skip funding recommendations, round 4. Item 8.2, revision to conditions of draft plan of subdivision approval, 49 Ridley Road. 8.3, administer the non-parking AMPS bylaw 2021-68. 8.4, City of St. Catharines Multi-Year Accessibility Plan 2021 to 2025, and in council correspondence is 8.5, and I believe it's save and accept the piece that Councillor Littleton will be bringing forward shortly. Okay, Councillor Garcia.
You got it.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes, with
Counsel-
my conflict noted to 8.1.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, we're going to go into the public meetings now, and this is a declaration to all presenters. Council chambers is in all municipalities in our country represent the seat of local democracy. The many acts that govern us understand the necessity of the collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and to seek opinions into very complex issues. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, and the public to have an opportunity to participate, and all participants to be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another, question one another, but we always understand we do this in a way that never undermines any person's ability or their dignity in our council chambers. So with that, we're going to go into 9.1, which is a planning and building services and its recommendation report application to amend zoning bylaw 213-283, subject lands 36 The Cedars. The purpose of the public meeting is to ensure that sufficient information is available to the public to understand the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw 213-283 regarding 36 The Cedars, to provide the public with an opportunity for input before council's decision. Planning Building Services staff held an open house and prepared a report on the application. The planning meeting will proceed as follows. Evan Axe, correct? Okay. Planner with Planning and Building Services will explain the proposal. The public will have an opportunity to speak on the proposal. As today's public meeting is being held electronically, members of the public wishing to speak to the item were advised to RSVP with the Office of the City Clerk by 9 a.m. on Monday, November 29th in order to speak. No one requested to speak. Members of the public were provided with the opportunity to submit written correspondence. Items received have been added to the council sugar sink folder. If a person does not make an oral written submission prior to the council decision, that person is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Ontario Land Tribunal and may not be added as a party to the hearing of any appeal by others without the permission of the tribunal. The agent, Greg Hind, land use planner, urban environments, and the solicitor for the applicant, Patrick Maloney, partner, Sullivan Mahoney, LLP, will present. Staff will respond to any questions. The public meeting will be closed. So I call upon planner Evan Axe to present regarding the application. That's a lot of speaking.
Thank you, Mayor Senzik. So we'll dive right into this. Just let me. All right. So the application is for 36 The Cedars, zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please, Evan. So the application is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment to permit a garage that was built without a permit to remain at a setback of 2 meters from the front lot line, and that garage is also projecting beyond the front wall of the dwelling. Next slide. So 36 The Cedars is located on the west side of the Cedars, adjacent to Walker's Creek Park, and it's in a neighborhood in the northwest of the intersection of Linwell Road and Niagara Street. Next slide. So we just have a series of photos. So this is a photograph of the subject property at 36 The Cedars, with the garage in its partial state of construction, visible on the left side of the photo. Next slide, please. These are the dwellings immediately to the north of the subject lands. Neighborhood is residential, single detached dwellings. Next slide, please, Evan. And this is the land uses to the east. Again, a detached dwelling. Next slide. To the south, we have the additional residential dwellings, detached dwellings as well. Next slide. And then to the west is Walker's Creek Park. And the subject lands backs onto Walker's Creek Park. All right, next slide, please, Evan. So this is the site plan that shows the garage as constructed. The garage is highlighted in orange on this site plan. The green is the front wall of the dwelling, and the red oval is highlighting the 2 meter setback from the front lot line. The front lot line being the line on the right-hand side of the screen. So there's a 2 meter setback from the front lot line to the garage. So provincial policy context, the application is found to not be inconsistent with relevant provincial policies, including the provincial policy statement and the growth plan. Next slide. The proposal is found to not be consistent with nor conform to the regional official plan. Next slide. The property is identified as neighborhood residential on Schedule D1 of the city's official plan. In the next few slides, the subject property is highlighted in bold line. The next slide is schedule. No, sorry, Evan, a little too fast. Okay, that slide, correct. This is the property. It's designated low-density residential on Schedule E2 of the city's official plan. Please note that in an error in Appendix 5 in the report, this schedule is identified as E3, but it is in fact E2. Next slide. The property is designated, is zoned R1 in the city's zoning bylaw. And next slide. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment would seek to rezone the property from R1 to R1 with a special provision being special provision 165. Next slide. All right, so special provision R1 165 seeks to change the zoning of the subject lands to recognize the reduced setback of the garage and also to permit the garage to project beyond the front wall of the dwelling. The site-specific zoning requirement will allow the garage to be located at a setback of 2 meters from the front lot line. Based on our current zoning bylaw, based on the setbacks of neighboring dwellings and our zoning bylaw requirements for averaging of front yard setbacks with neighboring dwellings, the garage should be at a setback of about 9 meters and also located behind the front wall of the existing dwelling. So in this case, the garage is projecting beyond that front wall, and it is also set back 2 meters from the front lot line. Next slide, please, Evan. So staff's analysis of the application found that the location of the garage on subject lands is not compatible with neighboring properties, does not integrate well into the neighborhood, overwhelms the streetscape, and has an adverse impact on neighboring properties. Next slide, please. The application was circulated to all appropriate departments and agencies. The Niagara region did not request to be circulated on this application due to lack of specific regional interest in the application. No objections were received from any of the departments or agencies that were in fact circulated. And then, and it should be noted as well that we did not have a public open house for this application. It was deemed by staff that we could waive the requirement for a public open house due to the localized nature of the zoning bylaw amendment, as well as a series of previous committee of adjustment hearings on this property earlier this year. Next slide, please, Evan. So based on our review, staff recommend denial of the application on the basis that it conflicts with the region of Niagara's official plan and does not meet the intent and guiding policies of the City of St. Catharines official plan. And it should be noted that denial of the zoning bylaw amendment is not a punitive measure for building a structure without a building permit. There are appropriate provisions in the Building Code Act that would allow city recourse in that matter. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to Evan Axe for the presentation. We'll now go, there is no one from the public who wishes to speak. I'm going to go to the agent, and that'd be Greg Hind. And if the agent has any comments, or the solicitor for the applicant, which is Patrick. So any comments, questions?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start if you allow me to. Good evening to you and to members of council. So my name is Patrick Maloney. I'm a partner with the law firm Sullivan Manny here in St. Catharines. I am joined this evening by both Greg Hind and Shelley Tenbrook, who is the owner of 36 The Cedars. It is our intention to provide a joint presentation between Greg and I, and Greg will focus on some of the planning considerations with respect to this development, this application. In terms of a little bit of background, this summer Greg and I were contacted to assist Shelley to address the zoning contravention associated with the garage. At that time, we learned that Shelley had hired a contract to undertake renovations to her home, including the construction of the new garage. The purpose of the new construction or new garage was to increase the living space within the dwelling to provide more room for her children who were returning home. She did have faith in a contractor that he would get all of the permissions to allow this construction, including a building permit. Unfortunately, at the very same time, Shelley's mother was dealing with a cancer diagnosis, and Shelley was subsumed in taking her mother to those appointments and spending time with her, and relied on the contractor to get what was needed. Unfortunately, when the garage was partially constructed, Shelley learned that a permit had not been applied for and that the structure was not permitted in the location where it was constructed. Now, I want to make it clear to council that Shelley is taking responsibility for the error, and our appearance this evening is to rectify the problem. But the key consideration I'd ask you to think about is that this was not done deliberately by Shelley. It was an inadvertence on her behalf. She has learned the hard way that permits were not obtained, and the application before council this evening is to work on obtaining the necessary zoning permissions to allow our client to submit a building permit application for this. I did want to take a moment to review some of the pictures that were within the planning report. Mr. Axe did provide some pictures, but there were other pictures associated with the planning report. If Mr. McGinty can assist me with this, if I could just ask, yeah, thank you. This is the head-on picture of 36 The Cedars. Well, it may be a matter of perspective. I think it is clear that the garage will be an attractive addition to the home and to the neighborhood in general. It uses attractive building material and will fit within the streetscape, and Mr. Hine will comment on that a little bit more. If Mr. McGinty, the next slide, please. This is, I think, one of the most telling pictures that you can consider. This is from the south looking north. It includes the home at 34 The Cedars, which will be the most impacted property in the entire neighborhood. I wanted to note a few things. You'll see there is a large coniferous tree right at the corner of that dwelling that will provide year-round buffering between the dwelling and the garage. I would suggest that if the neighbors looked out their front window, they would likely barely see that new garage. There also is a smaller tree in front of that that will also provide some buffering. Now, I'll address the neighborhood comments in a moment, but the owner of this property right next to the garage, and I said arguably the most impacted, does not have an issue with this garage being located there. He indicates he has no objection so long as the proper permits are put in place, and I'm paraphrasing what he said. Mr. McGinty, if I can go to the next picture. Again, this shows a little bit more of the vegetation I was referring to that provides the buffering between the two properties. Next slide, please. Now, this is from the north looking south. Again, there is landscaping on Shelley's property that would provide some buffering to the property immediately to the north, and again block the view of that garage. Again, with respect to support, the owner of that property has also indicated that they have no objections to the garage in its present location. And last slide, Mr. McGinty, please. This is intended to give a bit of a sense of the immediate neighborhood. There's a large, what I call the cul-de-sac, with a large treed boulevard in between. You know, this is clearly within a well-established neighborhood in the city with limited access, with really limited possibilities of impact associated with the garage. It shows that the sight lines will not be impacted, and the garage location would be essentially where those two cars are, the red car and the white car. That's where the approximate location of the garage. I also wanted to point out that immediately across the street there is a garage of the owner of that property. Well, the property, that's their side yard technically, it does face towards the Cedars, but their garage is pushed forward and there is really only enough room for one vehicle there, and they also use the boulevard for parking. I'm not saying that this is a precedent, but it does show an example of how it does fit within the immediate neighborhood. If I can turn it over to Mr. Hind to address some of the planning aspects of this.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Greg Hind. I'm with Urban Environments. So good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Just before we start down the process that I undertook to analyze this, I just want to say that the minor variance application that was dealt with by the Committee of Adjustment, denied by the Committee of Adjustment, based on the staff report, I agree 100% with staff's position in that and the Committee of Adjustment decision. I was asked by the owner to review the file for a planning solution after the Committee of Adjustment decision, and to see if I could come up with a solution that didn't involve demolition or taking it to the landfill, and hopefully avoiding a public hearing in regards to the planning review panel. I recommended a zoning amendment basically because we don't have to drill down with 4 tests and of the Planning Act in regards to what's minor and what's not minor, and that's what the Committee of Adjustment had to do. We get better input, more transparency by doing zoning. We can review all general policies, and we certainly get council input into the decision making, and that's a good thing when it comes to neighborhood concerns. The construction of the building also gave us a unique opportunity to take a fresh approach to this application. And with the added benefit of the built form in place, it was much easier to measure the impact on the site, the impact on adjacent properties, the impact on street, and it gave us a proper reference to where that building sat. It also gave a unique opportunity for the neighborhood to see the built form and to assess their impact of this on their neighborhood and on their specific properties. It was much easier for me to do an urban design analysis, and that's what I did. I took a fresh approach. I did an urban design analysis using the test of form, fit, and function in regards to this site. I'm old enough to remember when the Cedars was built, because my business partner at the time designed the Cedars and the Pinery. And it was based on a themed residential development, small lots, low building profiles, and it was very popular at the time. But once again, all the same type of building, low profiles, and it became apparent that it was pretty hard to change floor plans and building additions with the small lots. And it's also becoming very difficult to change these buildings in regards to amendments to zoning bylaws and even applications through minor variances to reflect different lifestyles. I don't think we can lose sight while what initiated this application. It was done to provide intergenerational housing in the house for a family member that was returning, and the owners needed room to accommodate that expansion. Out of the 37 residential lots on the Cedars, 8 expansions have happened into the front yard already. 4 of these involve garages into the front yard itself. The garage that you see before you is designed as part of a whole new front facade. I don't think, and I certainly didn't, when I analyzed this application from a design analysis, an urban design analysis, the first thing you notice when you walk the street, look at the site, is not the garage. It's the new entrance that is centered in the middle of that property. And this is a building application that involves more than the garage. It involves, yes, the garage, a new entrance, and a new covered porch. This is a whole facade improvement that has a dramatic impact on that streetscape, a dramatic impact in the neighborhood. The garage, in looking at the garage, it becomes very apparent that it does address some of your official plan guidelines. For instance, the city's design guidelines indicate that they don't want a garage to exceed 40% of the facade. This garage doesn't, and it's certainly proportionally integrated into the building with windows, doors, and front porches, all as part of a new facade in this instance. The garage is one major element of that, but you can't look at the garage in isolation. The garage is not wider than half the building width, another design guideline envisioned by your city's documents. And this garage, the front face of the garage, integrates glass panels, architectural details, and they combine with the neighboring architectural styles. All the above incorporates parts of design guidelines for garage design for residential, single, small, and infill lots put forward in the city's policies. When we did our analysis, we filtered it against fit function of the cedars, and I'll just highlight some of the results that we got in filtering this application.
So Mr. Hine, I just want to know how much more do you have of your presentation?
3 or 4 minutes.
Could you try and make it 2?
I'll try.
Okay.
When we analyzed it against the form of the site, it fit within the form, new lighting, new building materials, a variety of architectural styles. It would certainly fit in with the form established by the Cedars and the new expansions to 8 of the Cedars expansions. Fit's really a measure of impact on the street. The best indication of fit is that there's neighborhood acceptance of this application. There's neighborhood acceptance of the new facade treatment, and it fits within the streetscape and all the design elements that were made. Elevated entrances, new covered porch, all the details that went into the garage. Another indicator is, and Mr. Maloney indicated, is 36 the Cedars, the adjacent property. There's good spacing. The spacing doesn't change between the 2 building facades. The coniferous trees that run all along the boundary line and cover the windows. There's still a nice activity area in the front yard. There's still good presentation of that front yard, the same as the Cedar 36 the Cedars itself. But I said the best indication of neighborhood fit is the neighbors' acceptance of this. Functionality is the other important element. Does this site function the way it functioned before, or is it an improved function? Does it impact the function of other properties in the area? And it's my opinion that the front yard activity area was improved as a result of this application. The driveway functions in the same manner, providing off-street parking, safe and efficient sight lines. There's no additional shadowing or overlook onto the adjacent properties. Property values have been retained, which is one key element of zoning. The neighborhood supports the addition, which is an excellent sign that the neighborhood will function in the same manner. All municipal departments except planning, of course, supported this application, including your traffic division. Traffic patterns on the street and parking off-street will remain the same and function in addition. In summary, our recommendation and opinion is that the garage addition, in concert with the main entrance and covered porch, provides for an improved streetscape, a variety of architectural styles that fits with the neighborhood. It improves the functionality of the site without impacting the neighbor's character. The proposed bylaw in front of you, Mr. Mayor, provides a fair land use solution to an unfortunate circumstance regarding the process. Thank you. I'm available for questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Hine, for that. And are there any questions of the presenters, not of staff, just the presenters? Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Mr. Hines. Mr. Hines, first of all, as far as the design of the structure, was it designed by an architect, do you know, or did the contractor design it?
It was done by a designer draftsperson, but he's quite familiar with modern design. He's quite familiar with good design. And that's all I have to say about his design.
And the structure, in your estimation, is very, very solid. From the looks of it, it's quite modern. It is well constructed.
Very well constructed.
Okay. And lastly, you mentioned the neighbors to the right and the left don't have any concerns. Do you know if Mrs. Tenbrook has had any complaints from neighbors across the street or down the street? Or are they supporting?
But I'm certainly aware of an awful lot of compliments.
Pardon? I didn't hear that, sorry.
I'm certainly aware of an awful lot of compliments.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Seeing no other further questions of the, Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the site plan that was presented by staff, there's an area highlighted behind the garage. What is that area? That's not part of the garage, is it?
No, that's the new living space that was formerly occupied by a carport.
Okay, and if that garage were taken down, what would the building look like? And I asked you...
It would be more reflective of what exists on the Cedars now. It would flatten out the presentation. If the garage was taken down and the entrance remained and the covered porch remained, I think it would be totally off balance in its presentation to the streetscape. I think the three work in tandem. The three work perfectly as providing a balanced approach and a good urban design approach to that streetscape. Taking any one of those elements away is going to destroy that presentation.
Thank you. And I understand that you served on the design review panel, so you do have a lot.
Yes, I was fortunate enough to be the chairman of the design review panel.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Sorrento, then Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Council Maloney. Sir, just a clarification. When you were presenting on behalf of Mrs. Tannenbrock, did you say that that Mrs. Tannenbrock put her total faith and trust in that particular company to go through the proper channels and to get the proper permitting, Council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Sorrento. Yes, unfortunately, Ms. Tenbrook was dealing with some personal issues, and perhaps put a little more faith in what she should have in the contractor in hindsight. But yes, you are correct.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council. So would it be a fair statement for me to think, and I'll put it out there, that Mrs. Tannenbrock, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, was under an incredible amount of duress, stress, emotional pain while she was caring for her loved mother, and that she probably couldn't even think about the permitting or the garage. Would that be fair for me to think that?
I think that's a fair statement.
No further questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters. I'm just trying to understand. So they're halfway through the construction, and then they realized that permits would be needed. Is that correct? They were halfway through it before they realized this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. So it was partially constructed, and at the time she put a stop to it. Immediately applied for planning approvals, and here we are today.
Well, I am empathetic to people having issues going through things and whatnot. So after they realized that permits would still be needed to build this, they just continued to build without the permit.
Through you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Mayor, excuse me. What we advised Ms. Tenbrook was that it needed to be enclosed. There was a health safety issue with it being enclosed, but she took full responsibility that if at the end of the day it didn't receive the required planning approvals, that she would have to remove it all. So it was at her expense, knowing that that expense could ultimately be wasted, but it became more of a safety issue. It had access, the garage had access to the interior of her home, and that needed to be blocked off. So while there was some construction, it was mostly to deal with preservation of the material that had been constructed and those safety reasons.
Okay, thank you. Would this be an appropriate time now to ask staff questions, or should I wait?
This is just for the presenters.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other further hands up for the people representing the applicant, I'm going to ask for council to close the public meeting. So motion to close the public meeting. Councillor Phillips, Councillor Porter, all in favor. Public meeting is now closed. And now we can have the questions of staff. So Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the mayor to, I guess, the Director of Planning. Obviously, there could be some hazards or some dangers here. This is a reason why we have these policies put in place. And when I look at the driveway, for instance, it seems like the parking would be very close to the road. Do staff foresee any hazards or dangers with the vehicles being so close to the road?
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor, the zoning bylaw requires one parking space per dwelling unit, which in this case can be handled within the garage. So therefore, any other parking on the driveway would be considered in addition to that. The driveway width the driveway length on the private property is 2 meters long, which is not sufficient for a regular vehicle. However, the physical driveway itself is long enough to adequately contain a typical family vehicle without it impeding the roadway. And there's also no sidewalks on this side of the road.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess my concern is from the photos that I'm looking at, it looks like it's very close to the apron. Is that correct? Like, isn't there, I believe there's a distance from the apron to where the vehicle can park. Isn't there a policy that the city has where it has to meet a certain distance from the apron?
Through the chair to the councillor, no, we do not have a bylaw requirement that requires a certain distance to the city's boulevard. We do have a parking requirement that a parking stall size meet a certain length between the front wall of the house and the property line if there's no garage. However, there is a garage in this case. So again, 2 meters is what's the length of the driveway on the private property. That itself is not sufficient, but there is no sidewalk, and we do permit parking on the portion of the driveway that's on the municipal boulevards. And in this case, that portion is long enough so that the vehicle will not be extending onto the roadway.
Okay, so just want to make sure I'm understanding this. The driveway minus the garage alone, would the driveway meet the city's policy for parking?
Through the chair to the councillor, if there was no garage, then the answer is no, it would not meet the minimum required parking.
Okay. And my last question is if council does decide to provide, I guess, an amendment, or would the applicant be responsible for purchasing a permit for this work that has been done, even though it's after the fact?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to the councillor, should the zoning for this property be approved either by council or the tribunal, then yes, the applicants are expected to get a after-the-fact building permit to demonstrate that the addition was built in accordance with the Ontario Building Code.
And final question is, are there penalties attached to that for this happening after? My concern here is that we'll be setting this precedent where people can build something without permits and then just, basically ask forgiveness after doing it. I'm just wondering kind of how do we avoid this from happening ongoing? It's opening up that opportunity for people.
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor, the city's rates and fees bylaw does provide for a financial penalty for building permits that are applied for after construction has already started. So I imagine that that would be applied for in this case. With regard to the second part of your question, we always look for voluntary compliance, and in this case, the landowner has been forthcoming in trying to achieve compliance. But if that relationship were to change, then we do have other avenues under the Building Code Act that we could take in terms of prosecution.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of really quick questions. The first one, I threw you to the Director of Building and Planning Services. What recourse does a property owner have, if you know, when a contractor doesn't pull permits?
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor, unfortunately, this would be a civil matter, and the landowner would be encouraged to go through the courts to get their reimbursement, I suppose, for the scenario that they've been through.
Okay, and second of all, I know we are talking a lot about the garage, but those two roof features, which the one solicitor mentioned, do we need permits for those as well? Is that what we're being asked tonight to consider?
Thank you. Go ahead, Evan.
Okay, sorry, Tammy, I was struggling for the mute button. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Littleton. The roof feature and the covered porch that has been added to the front of the house are in compliance with the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Och.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Sarento, you get your hand up?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to make some comments at this time with regard to the report. Is that okay?
No, we're just asking questions of staff and then the motion we put on the screen.
Perfect. Okay, I'll address it at that time. Thank you.
Councillor Garcia, questions of staff?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions. I guess to Director TK, for you. I didn't think that she quite answered the last question regarding a permit. Do we understand that the new roof line and covered porch are also new construction, and would a new permit not be required for all of that, or was there a permit for those two and not for the garage?
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor, there were no building permits applied for any of the additions that were built to the front of this structure. So that would include the porch, the canopy over the front room, as well as the garage addition. There were no permits for any of them. So should council approve the zoning bylaw amendment tonight, or should the tribunal make a decision allowing the zoning to move forward, then after the fact building permits would be required for all three of them. Should the zoning not be approved by council and or not approved by the tribunal, then building permits would still be required for the porch and the front room canopies, as well as a permit to demolish the garage addition.
Thank you for that. And one more quick procedural question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Act, I guess. You said in your presentation that the region did not request to be circulated on this. I assumed always that there was a requirement that we had to circulate such matters to the region, but you're saying they actually have to request to be on it?
Through you, Mayor Sunzik, to Councillor Garcia, there is a bit of semantics there that the Planning Act does require that the region always be circulated on zoning bylaw amendment applications, but applications that are deemed to have a regional interest, and an example would be perhaps it's on a regional road, or perhaps it's adjacent to an environmental feature regulated by the region, there would be an additional fee, and the region would review the application from a regional perspective and provide provide those comments. In this case, there was no regional interest in that sense. So they were circulated, but they did not require to be circulated and did not require a fee.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. Seeing no other further questions, we have a motion that will be put on the floor. And the motion is the motion that staff have put on the floor. And the way forward, just so the public is aware, we would have to remove or vote against the staff recommendation, then a new motion would be entertained. So we're going to go through that step. Councillor Sorrento, you had a question just related to the motion. I need a mover and a seconder just to get it on the floor, and we have to vote. Councillor Porter, seconded by Councillor, do I have a second? Councillor Townsend. So it's on the floor, and this is the staff recommendation. Speaking just to the staff recommendation, Councillor Sorrento, you had your hand up?
I did, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to wait and see how this unfolds procedurally, and then should this not pass, which I hope it doesn't, then I'll speak to an amendment if it's going to be the will of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips, speaking just to the motion. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be supporting the staff recommendation, and this is a very, very unfortunate situation. Councillor Dodge and I have been working with the resident on this for a very long time. As far as the structure is concerned, I make the comment that the residents nearby the house have no problem with it. They actually like it, according to the owner. She's had positive comments about it, particularly with the people on either side. The structure, although in contravention to the zoning bylaw, and to me, it indicated that it doesn't blend in with the streetscape. I, having driven by, disagree with that. I think it looks really, really good. It's quite modern and fits in nicely with the neighborhood. We always talk about setting a precedent. Well, I don't think this is setting a precedent. We deal with individual situations from residents often, and we make those decisions based on the knowledge and the information that we have, such as what we've been given tonight. That's the role of council in a situation like this. So I don't see it setting a precedent. If another one comes down, in all the years I've been on council, I don't know that we've had, I can't remember if we've had one of these before or not. Perhaps we did, but in dealing with a one-off, I see that as our role. The resident is not the type of person who's trying to put one over on the city. In no way is that the case. She was misled by her contractor. If you build a garage or build something in your house and you hire a contractor, it's his response or her responsibility, whoever's building it, to get the permits. You just assume that they're going to be done. And because of the situation with her family, perhaps she didn't go and ask him, hey, did you get the permit? But any upstanding contractor who's going to build a structure like this knows that they need a building permit. And she was misled by a contractor, and I'm sure that when she contracted with this person, had he gone to City Hall and said, sorry, we can't build this because you're in contravention of a bylaw, she would not have built it. But she just put her faith, her blind trust in this person, and was misled. So, Mr. Mayor, I support the resident, and if this is defeated, I'll have a motion to be put on the screen for council to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Garcia, got your hand up again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that I have been quite conflicted by this application, and when I first read the report, I was certainly supportive of staff recommendation for the reasons that Councillor Townsend mentioned, that you know, we do have zoning regulations, and this violates both the setback from the lot line and from the front of the house. However, having learned about the extenuating circumstances and also the fact that, as Director Pite explained, and Councilor Phillips just mentioned again, we're not setting a precedent that we have to live with for somebody else. I will vote against the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia, Councilor Kushner, and then round it off with Councilor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Years ago, in terms of property standards, we introduced the concept of frivolous and vexatious complaints. And that concept served us very well. And in this case, I see the argument that somebody made a complaint. They're not the approximate neighbors. They're not the adjacent neighbors. And they're, most of the neighborhood has indicated that they are very pleased with the style. And as Mr. Hind indicated, the best indication of neighborhood fit is neighborhood acceptance. And so I consider the complaint, one complaint, to be vexatious and frivolous, and therefore I'm in full support of the position taken by the ward councillors. I understand, looking at the staff report, that staff really had no choice but to make the recommendation that they did. Thank you.
And Councilor Kushner, Councilor Miller, then Councilor Dodge.
Yeah, thanks. I'm also against the staff recommendation. I certainly appreciate why they had to make it to follow those rules. I think I am sympathetic to the concern about the precedent we're setting, and certainly felt like some legal drama in here today, but I will note that this is one of the first ones we've really had like this. So I think any concern about precedent might be a little bit overblown, or we'd see this on a more regular basis. So I think we're here to treat these on a case by case. I think the circumstances, as Councillor Kushner noted, are quite rare and extreme. And I think this is the kind of thing we have to listen to be a compassionate city and support this resident. So be voting against this, and happy to vote for the ward councillor's motion if they have a new one.
Thank you, Councilor Miller. Councilor Dodge for the wrap-up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't repeat all that my fellow colleagues have said, other than the fact that I do agree with that, and I will not be supporting staff recommendation. I do understand where they're coming from, and we've been working on this for over a year now, Councilor Phillips and myself, so we do have something going forward if this should not pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Dodge, and call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Porter.
No.
Councillor Phillips.
No.
Councillor Cisco.
No.
Councillor Sorrento.
No.
Councillor Townsend.
No.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
Councillor Dodge.
No.
Councillor Garcia.
No.
Councillor Harris.
No.
Councillor Kushner.
No.
Councillor Littleton.
No.
Councillor Miller.
No.
And Mayor Sendzik.
No.
And that's lost.
Okay, so I would like to thank Planner Och for that, for his report. And I did say his name wrong, so I'll say it again, Planner Och. You did a great job. Okay, now we have one on the, if you can bring up the motion, Councillor Phillips will be moving it, seconded by Councillor Dodge. And this has been a motion that was built with staff support, so I don't think we need to have a lot of questions on this one because we know staff are supportive of this motion. So any clarification questions on this motion? Okay, not seeing any.
Mayor?
Yep.
Sorry. I would like to add some staff direction, perhaps,
okay,
regarding what happened here. I don't know if it's appropriate to do it now or after we discuss the motion.
No, well, we're not, I don't think we really need to discuss it too much. I think if you want to put your staff direction, it would be helpful, and then we can move forward.
Okay, so I would like to add staff direction that staff work with the homeowner to make sure that the Niagara Home Builders Association is made aware of what happened here, so that hopefully they can avoid such things happening in the future.
Okay, I know that our planning staff work closely with the Niagara Home Builders Association, so we don't know at this time if this individual is a member, the company that, that had created this condition, so making them aware of it, I think, is an important step for the home builders to be aware of what's happening in this case as well. Councillor Williamson, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, yes, I do. Thank you. Just the question is, through you, Mr. Mayor, have Ms. Tenbrook's legal representative and planning representative, are they familiar with what's on the table here?
I'm going to say, I don't want to, are they familiar, staff? Because this was something that was drafted up.
Through, well, in response to you, Mayor Sendzik, staff prepared this motion in the understanding that there may be there may not be sufficient support for staff's original recommendation. The agent and the solicitor were made aware that staff had prepared an alternative motion, and that a draft bylaw had also been prepared in the event that that the alternative motion is approved. So they are aware. I just they haven't seen this as of yet.
Thank you, Planner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Planner Och. Okay, no further questions on this, and I think we can call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Excuse me. Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes, and I'll just add a PSA that if you're going to be doing any kind of construction on your homes here in St. Catharines, I would strongly suggest reaching out to the Niagara Home Builders Association to make sure that they are a member of the Niagara Home Builders Association before moving forward with a selection of a contractor. I think this is a great example of why we work closely with organizations like that have an ability to ensure that their members are following the proper regulations and codes that are expected by them by the Ontario Building Code and by the cities of St. Catharines and the region and other municipalities. So it's a great example of why you should always call an organization like that before you select a contractor. Okay, let's move in. We got a couple more planning. We got a lot to get to, so let's see if we can get through this in an expedited way. This is another public meeting, a recommendation report application to amend the city's zoning bylaw 213-283, subject lands 37 Workdale Drive. So again, I'm not going to say what I said previously as a repeat. We have a planning meeting. The planner for the city will present the proposal. No one registered to speak. We do have the agent, Craig Rowe from Upper Canada Consultants, who's here to answer any questions. And then the public meeting will be closed, and then we'll consider the motion on the floor. This is for a very minor zoning amendment, so I'll turn it over to Charlotte McEwen, the planner with Building and Planning Services, who will explain briefly the proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. The second public meeting here this evening is regarding an application for zoning amendment 37 Workdale Drive. Next slide. For some context, the city previously approved a zoning amendment and a site plan for a 13-unit private road development on these lands. And since these approvals, the owner has obtained an adjacent property that was formerly known as 14 Rockdale Avenue. And they'd like to expand the approved private road development to add 5 additional units on this acquired land. So they propose to revise an existing special zoning provision to reflect the updates to the proposal and to apply that provision to the newly acquired lands, as well as to realign the zone boundary between residential and green space zones on the recently acquired parcel. Next slide. The lands are located on the southwest corner of Workdale Drive and Rockdale Avenue, and they have frontage along both streets. Their area is approximately 1.7 hectares, and they've got 30.5 meters of frontage along Workdale Drive and 39.3 meters of frontage along Rockdale Avenue. Next slide. These are the subject lands shown here. They're currently vacant. The 13-unit development that has been approved has not yet been constructed. Next slide. The Surrounding land uses are residential dwellings to the north here. And next slide shows the dwelling that exists to the west of the property. And next slide. The Niagara Escarpment is located along the lands to the south, and along the east is the Highway 406, which is actually not pictured, but I'm sure most people know what that looks like. The next slide, the site plan is shown here. The 13 units on the west are the previously approved private road development. And if you could hit next slide, these 5 highlighted units are the proposed addition to the private road development and would be accessed from the approved private road. The parking for the development is provided in driveways and in some street parking spaces on the private road. And there are no changes proposed to the previous approval. This is just an addition to it. And the realignment of the G1 boundary is in the sort of the bottom right here. We'll get into it a little more shortly. Next slide. The proposed amendment is consistent with provincial policies in the provincial policy statement and the growth plan outlined here. Next slide. The property is also located in the Niagara Escarpment Plan area, and the south portion of the property contains a significant woodlot, and it's designated Escarpment Natural Area. There's no development proposed for that area of the property, and the north portion with the development on it is within the urban area designation of the Niagara Escarpment Plan. The Niagara Escarpment Commission staff have commented on the proposed realignment of the zone boundary and on the additional proposed units, and they've said they meet the policies of the Niagara Escarpment Plan as long as a 5-meter landscape buffer is maintained around a portion of the significant woodland, which will be implemented through special provision that will be outlined in more detail shortly. Next slide. And the property is located within the built-up area identified in the regional official plan and meets the intensification supportive policies of the regional official plan as well. Next slide. The city's official plan designates the lands a neighborhood residential and natural area on Schedule D1. And next slide. It goes on to further designate the land's low-density residential and natural areas on Schedule E9. The residential portion of the lands permits a variety of residential dwelling types, including the detached dwellings they're proposing and private road developments in general. And the natural area designation does not permit development. Next slide. The low-density residential designation also has a target density of 20 to 32 units per hectare. The proposed development has a density of 17 units per hectare, which is the same density that was previously approved for the initial 13-unit development. The reduced density is included in the existing special provision. And though it's on the lower, it's below the target density, overall the development represents a more efficient use of the lands than currently exists and generally complies with the target density. And also, as noted, a portion of the property does contain a significant woodland, and it is designated natural area. The official plan doesn't require an amendment where minor boundary adjustments are made to the natural area based on more accurate mapping, which has been provided to the city through an environmental impact study carried out by the applicant and reviewed by the Region of Niagara and the Niagara Escarpment Commission. So no official plan amendment is required. Next slide. The lands containing the already approved private road development, which are on the west or on the left side of this, are zoned low density residential with special provision 137. And the newly acquired portion of the lands on the right side is split zoned with low density residential suburban neighborhood and conservation / natural area, or G1. Next slide. The applicant has requested the amendment to the bylaw to realign the boundary between the residential and natural area on the property and to revise special provision 137 and apply it to the entirety of the residential lands, which altogether would result in the zoning layout shown here. Next slide. The current zone boundary between the G1 and R1 zones generally reflects the official plan mapping. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to adjust that boundary to more accurately follow the boundary of the woodlot, and the proposed rezoning doesn't compromise the preservation or environmental integrity of that woodlot. The region and the Niagara Escarpment Commission have reviewed the environmental impact study that was prepared to inform the amendment and alignment of that zone boundary. They offer no objection, provided that a 5-meter buffer of landscaping be required along the edge of the woodlot through the site-specific zoning to ensure protection of the future. And both of those agencies will be involved in an ongoing site plan amendment, should this be approved, to ensure that it's enforced as well. Next slide. Here, this outlines the special provision 137. The first three provisions are all applicable to the original development and are proposed to remain. One provision is proposed to be deleted and is shown struck out here, and the remainder of the provisions are to be added. So if you go to the next slide, I'll explain those. This slide here shows the location of site-specific provisions 4, 5, and 6, which are requested to recognize reduced setbacks related to the previously approved units. The locations of the setbacks are shown here, and these units have already been approved through the registered site plan for the development. But since that approval was given, the city did pass the residential infill and intensification zoning bylaw amendment, which implemented increased setbacks for private road developments in this zone. These setbacks here reflect the previous development standards for this development that it was approved under, and the applicant has requested to formally recognize these setbacks on a site-specific basis. And the actual size and location of the units is not proposed to be changed for these 13 units. Next slide. This little red mark here shows the provision that's to be deleted from the special provision. When it was first approved, it included a reduction in a landscape buffer between the approved development and the adjacent residential property. But at this time, these properties have merged. So that little buffer doesn't actually need to be there anymore because it doesn't, that property line doesn't exist. So that is to be deleted. Next slide. And the last two site-specific provisions identified here applied to the newly acquired lands. Provision 7 is for a reduced exterior side yard setback. It's the top of the 5 new units. Given that this property line is set back quite far from the actual street, this isn't expected to impact the streetscape significantly at all. And overall, it's considered appropriate in that context. And the final provision is for the landscape buffer along the significant woodland, highlighted here in green. The applicants had submitted the EIS, which recommends this buffer, so it is provided on the plan and would be enforced through the special provision. Next slide. The application was circulated to all appropriate departments and agencies, and no objections have been received. A public open house was held in September, and there were no attendees and no written correspondence from any members of the public has been received. Again, this mentions the region and the Niagara Escarpment Commission have been circulated and involved in approving that 5-meter buffer. And again, no objections received. Next slide. Staff recommend that council approve the application as outlined in the recommendation, as it's consistent with provincial, regional, and the city's official plan policy. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. McEwen. Appreciate the presentation. So there is nobody from the public who has delegated to speak. We do have the Upper Canada consultants here to ask for any questions. Does anyone have any questions of council? Not seeing any questions, so I'm going to ask for the public meeting to be closed. Councillor Kushner, seconded by Councillor Phillips, all in favor of the closure of the public meeting. That is carried. We now have a motion that will be placed on the screen. If you do have questions of staff, now is the time, once we get the motion on the screen, which is to approve what Planner McEwen had put in front of us. I'm not going to read all the details. I'm just going to ask for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Porter, seconded by Councillor Littleton. Any questions of staff? I'm not seeing any questions of staff. I don't have the online people in front of me, so I can't see their hands up. So if there's anybody with their hands up, okay, I'll call the question and look to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Sorry about that. Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yeah.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, 9.3, Planning Building Services, and this is another zoning bylaw, 2013-283, subject lands 2 Thorndale Avenue. This is another public meeting, and I will say that Planner McEwen will do a presentation. Public had an opportunity to speak. No one has signed up to speak. The agent for the owner, Stephen Bedford, is present. He will not be doing a presentation, but will be there for questions. And there will be a brief presentation by staff, and then we'll close the public meeting and then go on to the motion. So Planner McEwen, brief presentation.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. This next public meeting is, as mentioned, for a zoning bylaw amendment for 2 Thorndale Avenue. Next slide. The land contains an existing semi-detached building with 2 units on site. Through discussions with the city, between the owner and the city, it was determined that the second unit has no record of having been constructed legally. The subject property was developed as a single detached dwelling sometime before 1970. And according to previous owners and the current owner, the second detached dwelling unit was constructed sometime in the mid-1970s and has been occupied with tenants since that time. However, we haven't seen sufficient evidence to support that this unit was constructed legally. And since that time, a zoning provision has been put in place that prevents 2 principal semi-detached dwelling units to exist on 1 parcel of land. Therefore, in order to obtain a permit for their second unit and continue operating as a semi-detached dwelling, the applicant does need a zoning amendment to permit this. The amendment also requests site-specific lot frontage and lot area for the semi-detached units. Next slide. The lands are located on the east side of Thorndale Avenue, north of Alice Street, and the land area is approximately 500 square meters and has 19.4 meters of frontage on Thorndale Avenue. This is the subject property. It contains the 1 building pictured here with both residential units, 1 in the front, 1 in the back. Next slide. The north, east, and west of the property is surrounded by residential dwellings as pictured here. And next slide. The south of the property abuts the rear of the Lake Carlton Commercial Plaza, shown here from the front and from the back as seen from the property. Next slide. The site layout here shows the building divided into 2 units, 1 front, 1 back, and it's defined as a semi-detached dwelling in the city zoning bylaw. Each unit is considered a principal unit, and the property has driveway access to Thorndale Avenue, and the driveway itself contains sufficient parking for the 2 units on site. It requires 2 parking spaces, and it provides 2 plus 2 additional ones in tandem. Next slide. The property is in keeping with provincial policy as listed here. And next slide. It also is in conformity with regional policy. Next slide. The city's official plan designates the land's neighborhood residential as on Schedule D1, which permits a wide variety of dwelling types, including semi-detached dwellings. Next slide. And it further designates it as low-density residential on Schedule E4 of the plan, which also permits semi-detached dwellings. The official plan itself does not restrict the number of principal dwelling units per lot for semi-detached dwellings. It has a target density of 20 to 32 units per hectare. The proposal has a density of 39 units per hectare, which is slightly higher than the target, but generally in keeping with the official plan and does just represent the increase of just 1 unit on the property. Next slide. The current zoning shown here is low density residential suburban neighborhood, or R1, which permits semi-detached dwellings, but does limit the number of principal units of this dwelling type to just 1 per lot. Next slide. The amendment would apply a new special provision, in this case, special provision 164, to the property to specifically allow 2 semi-detached units on 1 parcel and apply site-specific lot frontage and lot area provisions. The orientation of the units, with 1 in the front and 1 in the back, doesn't allow for an appropriate land division as the current zoning would require to separate the units onto adjacent parcels. So having 2 principal semi-detached units on 1 parcel, it doesn't compromise the front function of the lot, and it is considered preferable to dividing the land, as that was one potential avenue considered by the developer. And both units contribute to the number and mix of residential units available in the city. Next slide. The site-specific provision outlined here specifically permits the 2 units permitted on 1 parcel, and also outlines the site-specific lot frontage and lot area. The bylaw does require each unit of a semi-detached dwelling to have 12 meters of lot frontage, meaning they would need 24 total, and to have 370 square meters of lot area, or 740 square meters total. The proposal has 19.4 meters of frontage and 500 square meters of lot area. Generally, the frontage and lot area requirements are intended to ensure there's enough width and area for access, parking, building width and setbacks, and landscaping and amenity space. And the site layout does demonstrate that there is adequate amenity space located at the rear of the property. The access and parking is considered adequate on site, and the amount of landscaped area exceeds the minimum requirements, and there are no requested reductions to any building setbacks. Overall, the lot area and lot frontage are considered sufficient for the function of 2 semi-detached units on 1 lot and appropriate for the use of this property. Next slide. This application was also circulated to the appropriate departments and agencies, and no objections were received. And an open house was held in October with no attendees and no written correspondence sent from any members of the public. Next slide. Staff recommend that council approve the application as outlined in the recommendation, as it's consistent with provincial, regional, and city official plan policy. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Planner McEwen. Greatly appreciated. So again, we didn't have any questions or delegations from the public. Any questions of the agent for? I'm not seeing any. Motion to close the public meeting. Councillor Kushner, second by Councillor Littleton. All in favor? That is carried. Now we have recommendation up on the plan, up on the screen. I'm not going to read it. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Phillips, second by Councillor Porter, and I'll call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, so for the capital budget, we don't have anybody who has scheduled to speak. So what I'm going to ask for is that we open the public meeting, then we look to see if there's any speakers. There are none, so we close the public meeting, and then we're going to do the Firefighters Memorial, because we do have Acting Chief Upper is on holidays, so he's calling in from his holidays, and I know the chair, Barry Katzman, is on holidays as well, and he's calling in, so those two are waiting for the presentation. So if I can have a notice of adoption, so the public meeting for the capital budget, we're going to have the presentation not until we get to the actual report. So there is nobody scheduled to speak, and so I'm just going to ask for the public meeting to be closed. Councillor Townsend, seconded by Councillor Phillips, all in favor of closing the public meeting. That's carried. So we're going to move the presentation on the public meeting to after the presentation on what will be the firefighters. So we're going to go to the discussion reports. 11.1, update on the next steps for the Fallen Firefighters Memorial. We have Acting Chief David Upper and Chair of the Fallen Fires Memorial Task Force, Barry Katzman, who will be presenting, and making the staff recommendation. I have Councillor Dodge and Councillor Harris, who are both on the committee as well. Over to, I'm going to start with, put up your hand, who wants to go first? Acting Chief? Okay, Acting Chief, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. We're very excited to bring you the update from our Fallen Firefighters Memorial Task Force and our next steps. We have a slide deck that we're going to bring to you, and our chair, Barry Katzman, is going to present. So Chair Katzman, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Acting Chief. Through you to the Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and all staff. It's a pleasure, obviously, to be here to bring this update on the Fallen Firefighters Memorial that we've been working on cooperatively behind the scenes. For me personally, this is a very long time coming. I first had the discussion about doing a Firefighters Memorial in St. Catharines in 2013 in Colorado Springs with the president of the Firefighters Association, Ryan Medill, who's on this call as well. We were in Colorado because my late father-in-law was being memorialized at the International Firefighters Memorial in Colorado. And I asked Ryan if we had anything like this in St. Catharines, and he said no. And the funny thing is, when we got back, we found out that just about every municipality in Ontario has a memorial for fallen firefighters. You'd be surprised municipalities much smaller than ours have very elaborate ones. So we started talking about seeing if we could get something organized here. Through that early initiative with support from Mayor Sendzik and other members of council and the firefighters, we struck the task force thanks to the foresight of the city. And here we are, I think, which is an exciting update for us because we're about a week away from launching the formal campaign itself. So maybe we'll get the slideshow up, Evan, if you don't mind, and we'll go through that quickly and provide council with a fulsome update here.
I guess through the mayor to the presenters, I never received a PowerPoint. So if either Dave or Barry, if you can email that to me, or if you have it, I can make you a co-host and you can share it on your screen, but I don't have a copy of the PowerPoint.
That's okay. Dave, if you want to screen share, that's great. We've been working with cultural services and city comms. We anticipated that they would have sent that over to you, Evan, but I think we can speak to it. I don't want to, you guys, it's late already for all of us, so I'm going to keep things rolling along here. And if someone gets the report and we can breeze through it, that's great. But if not, I'll just speak to it quickly, assuming that that's okay with everybody, Mr. Mayor, et cetera.
Yeah, keep going.
I think everybody, thank you. I think everybody knows the location that was designated for this, which is the corner of McGuire, Ray Street, a high-profile area that the city had originally designated as a future parquet. That's the land we were going to use. We put together with the assistance from the purchasing department of the city. We vetted over 12 candidates that could be potential participants in an RFP process. Once that RFP process was, the vetting process was finished, we went through a very extensive RFP process with 6 different applicants. I will say, as a citizen, I was impressed with the city's purchasing department and the level of detail they put into this. It's an arduous process. We had a high level of scoring to pick the successful contractor. We expanded the beyond the city's task force to include members of the arts community, culture community, firefighters, et cetera. We had a real wide berth of people that participated in the judging of the applicants. The successful applicant is called CFC Supply. They're the ones that did the Firefighters Memorial in Windsor, also the one in Welland, and one of the co-owners is a platoon chief of the Windsor Fire Department. It's quite obvious they have a keen understanding of what this means, and so we were thrilled that of the 6 categories that everybody judged, and there was quite a number of people on the jury. They were the leader in 5. There we go. See, technology. And so just thank you, Evan. Go to the next slide. That's a little history. Obviously, the primary goal of this initiative is to honor those firefighters who have fallen in the line of duty. And Ryan Medill and others have spent a lot of time ensuring that we covered everybody back to even volunteers in townships to 1919, et cetera. Next slide, please. One of the things that I think is very important to recognize here is this is a public-private partnership. I believe that this will be one of the big achievements of this initiative once it's completed. As everybody knows, the funding for all the work that'll be done on site will come through the private sector, through private donations. I think the city took some excellent foresight with the land, et cetera, but we will raise the funds to accomplish the plan that we have through the private sector. Next slide, please. This is a quick overview of what the concept looks like. So the kneeling firefighter statue that you see has been blown up to the one that's in the middle of the park there. There's a walkway, benches, etc. This doesn't show the landscaping features, but this is essentially what the look will be. There's a sort of a naming wall on the one side and recognition of the fallen firefighters and the statue that speaks to it. Next slide, please. So here, this just highlights some of the design elements. It talks about CFC, who I already mentioned. You already know the parquet's in a high volume area. It's a high impact visual. There's a full landscaping treatment of it. A lot of the attributes that CFC brought to the table were very firefighter specific, such as the use of the Maltese cross, the use of fire hydrants as bollards, etc. It's an area that we think will add to the cultural landscape of the city, but also be a contemplative area for families and also a tribute to the firefighting profession. Next slide, please. That's the parquet itself with a couple of views of it. So it might have been easier to show that first and then show the design concept, but it's actually an excellent space, high traffic, it's fairly wide open. And I think that it provides an ample opportunity to achieve the kind of impact that this initiative should. Next slide. Obviously, we wanted to arrange a donor opportunity that allowed corporate donors to participate, but also we wanted everybody in the community to have a way to participate should they want to. So this slide just shows the sponsor wall. It really should be called a donor wall, and where recognition can be given to what will be the highest tier of donor. Next slide, please. There's the next available donor opportunities through benches and some of the landscaping on site. Next slide, please. And then there's an opportunity on the walkway into the park itself for individual bricks to be named, which will give individuals, perhaps, a member, someone's a member of the firefighters or knows them, or really anybody in the community, a relatively solid entry-level donation category. And the challenge for the committee, which I think, everybody did an excellent job on, a lot of good cooperative support from all stakeholders, was we have to be extremely tasteful. These aren't sponsorship opportunities. This is a fairly solemn place. So we have to have donor recognition, but donor recognition at tiers that lets corporations participate, but also everyday individuals that just want to be part of this will have that opportunity as well. Next slide, please. Sorry, have the next slide, please.
Sorry, Barry, that's the last slide in this
Okay,
PDF.
no worries. Yeah. I thought we had a wrap-up one, but that's fine. So I essentially, we plan to formally launch the campaign the first week in December with a website and the opportunity for the donors that we've already spoken to and donors yet to come to participate. I'm going to allow Acting Chief Upper and President Ryan McDill if they'd like to add anything, but I'll conclude by saying that I've been involved in a lot of fundraising in this community, as I think most of you know, for many, many years. This is a very unique project. The task force has received outstanding assistance from staff at the city, through the culture department, through the purchasing department. We've had excellent representation from the councilors and the mayor that are on our committee. It's truly a team effort. The firefighters are obviously, heavily engaged in this as well. So when it's all said and done, if we're successful, we're going to have a beautiful new park in the city that'll add to the cultural landscape of the city, that will rightly memorialize firefighters that have fallen in line of duty that's badly overdue and honor the profession of firefighters. And we'll do it all without leaning exclusively on the back of the taxpayers. It'll be hopefully an excellent balance between the private sector and the public sector. So I don't know, Chief, if you would like to add anything to that. Certainly concludes my comments. And maybe, Evan, we can, I think we can be done with the slide now.
Thank you, Chair Katzman. If President Medill, do you want to add something? You've been a part of this.
I think that was an excellent overview of everything from the Chair Katzman. Thank you for going through all that and doing such a great job. Thank you for taking the bull by the horns all those years ago and getting us to this point. Thank you to the Mayor and Council for setting aside this piece of property for this memorial. And we're very excited to really get underway in getting the fundraising going and make this thing a reality. So thank you.
Thank you, President Medill. And Upper Acting Fire Chief David Upper.
The one thing I was going to add, and I think Barry did a great job of summing it up, but Barry, if you don't mind, I think the one thing I'd like to add is that the goal for us to complete the project is the end of the year. We're hoping to be able to get the fundraising done in the first quarter, and by the last quarter, it's our goal to get the project in place. So I know that it seems quick in today's COVID times, but I certainly think that we can do it. And as Chairman Katzman said, we've had great support from our councillors. We've had great support from our team, St. Catharines, with all the different divisions. So it's been great, and we look forward to moving this on. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. This is a presentation to receive for information. So the only action is to receive. Can I have a motion, Councillor Dodge, seconded by Councillor Harris? And those are both the committee members. Any questions of council on this receiving for information? Councillor Williamson? You got to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was pleased to know that you're actually including the Old Louth, Grantham Township, townships, Merritt and Port Dalhousie in this. And I gather that you're working with the museum and the library as well to make sure that we have all the information we can. Is there going to be a virtual component of this as well? Digital, something online?
There hasn't been any plan, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Williamson. There hasn't been a plan for a virtual. It's not a bad idea for us to consider. To the first part of your question, there has been quite a bit of research done. Ryan Medill and others at the fire services have spent a lot of time. We've had Culture Museum involved as well, so it's a good question. We will also, once the project's launched, make available to anyone in the public that may have been missed. They'll still have an opportunity if someone that needs to be included in this was missed. The virtual component has been considered. I'm happy to bring that back to the committee for consideration.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for all your hard work.
All right, thank you very much. And seeing no other further questions of council, I want to say thank you to the chair and to Acting Chief Upper and President Medill, as well as the committee members for all the work that they've done to date. Looking forward to seeing the success of the fundraising campaign both kick off and come to a conclusion with, I know, a lot of support from the community. So I'll look to the clerk to call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. Now we'll go back to the capital budget, and we're going to have a brief presentation, which will be started by Director Douglas, and it will involve Director Martuccio, and I believe Director Christie will also be joining as well. So I'll turn it over to those three for a brief presentation, then we'll open up the discussion on the capital budget for 2022 for the City of St. Catharines.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors, citizens, senior staff. Devin, can you put the presentation up? Perfect. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors, citizens, and senior staff. Before you tonight is the proposed 2022 capital budget and four-year forecast for your consideration and approval. Next slide. The proposed 2022 capital budget includes a total funding level of $51,792,460 to address corporate needs and priorities to better service the residents and businesses in our community. Works include asset renewal, repair, and expansion to our core infrastructure, which includes assets like water mains, sewers, and transportation systems, as well as significant work to our non-core infrastructure, which includes assets like our facilities, natural assets, fleet, and IT systems. Next slide. The development of the capital budget was a collaborative effort amongst the various city departments and includes projects and initiatives to address the corporation's highest priorities. It recognizes the need to ensure that all city-owned infrastructure assets are sustainable into the future so that we can continue to provide basic core services, as well as the desire to enhance our quality of life for our residents and minimize environmental impacts while recognizing our economic challenges. The budget was developed to support the priorities identified in the St. Catharines Strategic Plan, while being guided by the various council-approved corporate strategies and master plans. Next slide. In 2019, Council declared a climate emergency and has since approved various initiatives and plans to help mitigate and adapt to climate change. This capital budget includes approximately $5.4 million for projects that continue to support climate change and environmental stewardship through projects that improve or protect our natural assets, improve the efficiency of our facilities, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our community. I will now pass things over to Phil Christie, our Director of Community, Recreation, and Culture Services.
Thank you very much, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of Council. This proposed capital budget also includes approximately $6.7 million worth of projects that support active and healthy lifestyles. The next two slides will show Council the types of projects that are included in this draft capital budget, resulting from the presentations and strategies that have been received and in most cases approved by Council, such as the Parks Renewal Plan, the Transportation Master Plan, and Beach Strategy, to name a few. This also includes the allocation of approximately $2.3 million for the expansion and renewal of our various types, and classifications of trails, multi-use path systems, and bike networks. Through our budget, we're also continuing to plan for the future expansion and improved connectivity to our active transportation network, and staff will make significant progress towards the creation of an active transportation master plan to guide both capital and operating budget discussions into the future. Next slide, please, Evan. In addition, approximately $4.4 million in the proposed 2022 capital budget will also support the continued delivery and execution of the Parks Renewal Plan, the Aquatic Strategy, the Culture Plan, and Beach Strategy, while the 5-year capital budget forecast includes the renewal of up to 20 playgrounds, 14 basketball courts, 8 tennis courts, 2 splash pads, and the continued renewal of our memorial benches. I will now pass things over to Ann Torini, the city's corporate asset manager.
Thanks, Phil, and good evening, Council. All the projects, next slide, please, Evan. All the projects that are included in the 2022 budget, which Anthony and Phil have just reviewed, total $51.79 million. And consistent with prior years, we fund these expenditures from a variety of sources. The Canada Community Building Fund, which was formerly called the Federal Gas Tax Fund, continues to provide ongoing source of funding year over year. The $9.25 million contribution this year is higher than in prior years due to the additional one-time contribution of $4.2 million. Reserve contributions include the development charges of almost $4.3 million, And the balance of the funding comes from debt, which is providing 45% of the total funding in 2022, which is a comparable ratio to prior years. Next slide, please. Looking at our capital plans and the related funding over the next 5 years is required by the Municipal Act. Like the budget, the projects that are included in the forecast are aligned with and they support the corporate strategies and plans. Many of our projects require budgets over several years. Lake Street Road and underground improvements is a good example for this year. The forecast also includes council-approved multi-year programs like the Parks Renewal Plan. In the graph on the screen, the green bottom band shows the projected debt funding. When each year's budget is prepared, the required expenditures and the funding details will be updated. Next slide, please, Evan. This graph shows the debt servicing costs in the lower blue blocks, and then also shows the council debt limit of 10% of own source revenues in the black line. Looking at the black line, the current forecast shows the 2022 debt servicing ratio moving to 10.07%, just above the 10% council limit. And by 2025, the debt servicing limit is forecast to reach 12.5%. Shown by the orange line, the city remains well within the provincial limit, which is better known as the annual repayment limit, or the ARL, and this is set at 25% of our own source revenues. The gap between the orange and the black line shows the debt servicing room between the city and the provincial limits. The debt limits will change as the actual results are incorporated into these ratios. Next slide, please. In conclusion, I want to highlight that the 2022 capital budget report before you today includes the staff recommendations for council's consideration tonight. Recommendations 2 and 5 relate to the funding of the 2022 capital budget and specific exemptions that have been made related to the approved debt management strategy. Recommendations 3, 4, and 6 create funding capacity for the 2022 capital budget. Next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, this concludes the staff's presentation of the 2022 capital budget and the 2023 to 2026 forecast. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Manager Turney, for that presentation, along with Director Martuccio and Director Christie. So we have a motion on the floor moved by Councillor Cisco, seconded by Councillor Littleton. And we've been through this. I'm going to ask if Councillor Cisco, as the budget chair, has any remarks before we have any further questions of council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No great remarks, simply that we've spent a number of months now discussing this. We've had a number of meetings related to the capital budget, and I think we've landed in a good place. Council had some very good recommendations, and changes were made to the capital budget this year, but I think what we have here sets us up well and is a good balance of all the competing priorities within the community. So I look forward to a unanimous vote in favor of this and moving the budget process along again.
Any questions on the budget for the capital? Councillor Miller, you have your light on?
Yeah, I just, we talked a little bit at the last budget meeting about use of the Civic Project Fund for things that come up during the course of the year. I'm just wondering how that works with the capital budget, if that's an option and what the standards are. I know that a couple issues have come up recently with staff, specifically regarding the tree planting on MTO lands, that we just won't know the figures and numbers. We'll have a capital, it could have a capital impact, so I'm just curious as how that process rolls out.
So we'll go to Director Douglas.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. With regards to the Civic Project Fund, the Civic Project Fund has been used for large capital projects in the past. When it comes to situations where there are projects that come up in year and that are not known or additional grants or projects that need to be completed, we do look at all available funding sources, such as previous projects that were completed perhaps under their allocated budgets, and we would also look to the use of reserve funds such as the Civic Project Fund. In more recent years, the Civic Project Fund has been used for more projects related to projects that have a more corporate or city impact, but it is a fund that if council desired, they could use it to fund some capital works.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm sort of tempted to vote against this now that I know that Councillor Cisco wants a unanimous vote, but happy to support this. Thanks to the Budget Committee for all the work and staff as well.
All right, thank you, Councillor Miller. Seeing no other further questions, I'll go to Councillor Garcia because he's got a hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask, I would like to please vote separately on the 2022 budget and the 4-year forecast.
Okay, so can you specifically say which paragraph you want to be lifted and voted on separately?
Well, it's not by paragraph. I think that if we could, for that first two-liner, if we could move the 4-year forecast to a separate line. I'm just not comfortable pre-approving higher debt limits in the future without details that we're going to have in the future when we look at them.
Okay, so just for clarification, that's what a forecast means. So you'll still be voting for it when the year comes up, of which they'd be going above that. But if you're, for your comfort level, you want to separate that out, I guess we can do that, Councillor. So Evan, if you can highlight the 4-year forecast as detailed in Appendix 1, Tab 2, Schedule A through V. We'll vote on that first. And I'll look to the clerk. And actually, do you have a seconder for that? Well, you don't need a seconder because it's a request to split the vote. Okay.
Can I make a comment on my request, Mr. Mayor?
I think you just did when you spoke about your being uncomfortable, so I don't know if you have to elaborate any further on that.
I just wanted to say, like, we're only going over very slightly in 2022, and, you know, we're getting out of the pandemic and so on, but I'm just hoping that in the future we don't have to go over our 10% guidelines.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Garcia.
No.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
And Mayor Senzik.
Yes. Okay,
That's carried.
so for the duration of the motion, which is a very good motion, I'll look to call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
And Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
All right, so just a quick thank you to staff and all the great work that they did, and also to council, because there's been a lot of meetings on the capital budget, so great work all around. 11.2, Planning Building Services. This is regarding 2630 Ontario Street, otherwise known as the pile of rubble over there, what used to be the Welland House. And so we do have the consultant of the owner, Dan Curry, partner with MHBC, is present to answer questions. We're not having a presentation from that individual. Prior to discussing the report, we will hear some introductory remarks from Michael Seaman, who is the senior project manager, who will hopefully provide some public sort of input as to why that rubble has remained a rubble for the last little while, as the community is very concerned about having that addressed in short order. So I'll go to the senior project manager.
Thank you, Mayor Senzik and members of council. At its meeting of February 24th, 2020, council recommended that a notice of intention to designate be issued for the property at 26 to 30 Ontario Street, that's the Welland House Hotel, under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The notice of intention to designate was appealed by the owner to the Conservation Review Board. After undergoing mediation, the owner agreed to withdraw the objection to the designation, subject to the statement of significance being scoped to the core heritage structure of the building, and adoption of the designation bylaw, and alignment with a revised statement of significance. The proposed bylaw was included on the agenda for the July 12, 2021 meeting of Council. However, the subject building succumbed to fire on the morning of July 12th. That evening, Council voted to pass the bylaw to designate the property under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Since then, City staff have worked with the owner of the property to determine a path for removing debris from the property and salvaging materials that are relevant to the property's statement of cultural heritage value or interest. City staff determined that a documentation and salvage report was required as part of the complete application submission for a heritage permit. The heritage permit is necessary for the removal of the debris from the designated heritage property. The documentation and salvage report provides a strategy for the retrieval of significant materials such as brick and stone to be incorporated within a future development and or interpretation strategy. The proposed strategy was recommended for approval by the St. Catharines Heritage Permit Advisory Committee at their November 25th meeting. And so the recommendation this evening is that the council approve the demolition permit for the remains of the existing fire damage designated heritage building at 26 to 30 Ontario Street. The demolition permit will allow for the removal of debris from the property and appropriate documentation, salvage, and storage of materials for incorporation within the future development and or interpretation of the property. That concludes my my statement.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Seaman. Hopefully the members of the public and members of the media will pick up on the fact that the property was in the process of being designated in 2020, well before what had happened in July. That's something that seemed to have been missing from some of the comments about the city's efforts to protect the heritage property. So with that, I'll look to the questions of council, and if I don't have any, we'll move a motion to approve. Who wants to move the staff recommendation? Councillor Porter, second by Councillor Cisco. And that is that we approve the heritage application to demolish. Can we, I think, any interest in putting a timeline on this? Can we say a 3 months, add a 3 month, that work commence within 3 months?
Absolutely. I think the business community and the residents who live around the site are getting really upset and frustrated with the state of the site, and we saw, at least in the newspaper and in this report, what is contained on the site. So I think the community needs to see this moving. This is what we're hearing. So yes, 3 months is great.
Okay, so we'll have that as an add-on. Councillor Garcia, you got your hand up?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm in full agreement with the that deadline. However, I would like to ask Director Kite to comment on whether that is appropriate legally.
Through the chair to the councillor, the act of demolition under the Ontario is regulated by the Ontario Building Code Act, and work would be expected to commence within short order of the permit being issued. The permit can be issued in short order. We're only waiting for some fee deposits at this time. However, in terms of council adding a time frame here, it is outside of their authority around the Building Code Act, and it would be difficult for us to enforce moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think the public is expecting us to do something. As in a council, I hope this would be a strong signal to the owners of the property and to staff that the public is expecting stuff to move as quickly as possible for the owner. So I think leaving that in there is a signal to the community that we're trying to take a proactive position on this. Councillor Kushner?
A question of clarification. In the report, they talk about having 2 pallets to have the bricks and other material. wouldn't the material on top be essentially the same as the material elsewhere?
We'll be looking to either Senior Project Manager Seaman for that. Or
I've spoken to the consultant and about the two pallets, and it really is at a minimum. The intent that I've been given is that there would be whatever is found underneath the rubble. It's hard to really determine at this point. Would be salvaged. It may be more than two, but if the more material there is, I guess the more material that we can utilize in any sort of salvage or interpretation for the future, any future structure that goes on the site. I think that maybe answers your question.
No, the question I'm asking is, you have layers of debris. Wouldn't they be uniform because the construction of the building was quite uniform from ground to the top?
So I can jump in, is that there has been some addition. It was wooden structure up to a certain point, then there was addition on top of that. A lot of the brickwork would be lower portion of the building, and then the foundation would be more stone that would have been extracted from the local quarries back in the mid-1800s. So that's why the lower parts of the building are possibly to extract some of that more heritage aspects of the building.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other further questions, I think we'll call a question on this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Shovels in the ground, yes.
Carried unanimously.
Aquatics 11.3, and Eric Lamoth, who is with Recreation and Culture, he's here to answer any questions. We have a motion on the screen moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Littleton, and that funding be included in the draft capital budget as outlined in the implementation timeline of the modified balanced strategic direction within the aquatics facilities strategy appendix 1. So that is the motion on the floor, and Councillor Miller, would you like to speak to it?
No, that's okay right now. I will say I thank Councillor Littleton for allowing me to move this one.
Okay, so we got two ward councillors. Any comments on this one? Okay, seeing no comments, I'll call a question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I should have assumed. Sorry. Councillor Garcia?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to ask Mr. Lamont before we vote, are there any updates on the situation vis-a-vis the Y and whether it might be available to us at some time?
I can take that, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Director Christie.
The only update that I can provide, Councillor Garcia, is that the YMCA has advised me directly as of last Friday afternoon, that they would like to finish the transaction with a potential buyer and then engage the city in potential partnership after the fact. So at this time, I have no update in terms of potential partnership. Although they remain open to that, they would like to finish the sale transaction first.
Sorry, so for you, Mr. Mayor, for clarification, they're saying that even though they sell the property, they would still have some influence in terms of a potential partnership, or would that be strictly with the new buyer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what I believe that what is happening is that perhaps the YMCA is exploring a model where some form of a partnership can be had, which may involve the potential buyer for the property moving forward. There are models out there where this type of agreements and arrangements exist. Not to say that it will come to fruition in this case, but what they have advised us is that they will pursue that once the sale process is complete, if that is amenable to all parties.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Seeing no other further hands up, I will call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Miller, once again, please.
So I'm just happy to say it multiple times. Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Hardy, yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson. Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, so we got 12.1, which is motions, and we have one on the screen. It's relating to a very specific matter to adjacent properties on Scott Street. We got a motion moved by Councillor Dodge, seconded by Councillor Phillips. And it's really just a housekeeping to try and address some issues in a very compact part of the area community. Any questions on this? Councillor Littleton?
I just have a question maybe staff can answer. I know Councillor Miller and I sometimes have very micro issues like this that we don't bring to council, and this is nothing against the ward councillors. I'm just kind of wondering why this is here.
So who's on the call from the Department of Transportation Parking Regulation? Is there anyone on?
I'll take it, Mr. Mayor.
Over to you, Director Martucci.
Mayor.
Yep, yeah, you got it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the reason that this has come before us is because of a situation where there is some driveways on Scott Street that are reverse slope towards the house, and there's sightline issues as well. Some of the residents there are using the aprons as parking, and there's parking issues within the adjacent street that need to be analyzed a little further. So staff are taking this opportunity to have a more holistic review of the bylaws that are in place related to this, so that we can revisit to see whether amendments need to be made to the bylaws that would be beneficial across the city.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Seeing no other further questions, I'll call a question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia. Councillor Garcia. Okay. Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia says yes.
I heard it, yes. Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
And Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, 12.2, special meeting of council. I think we're on the right one, and this is for December 8th at 6 p.m. Councillor Cisco is making the motion, seconded by Councillor Townsend. And again, this will be the discussion for regional transit. It could be a hybrid meeting, allowing councillors to either participate in person or electronically, and that that city clerk make the directed necessary notifications. All in favor? A show of hands on this one. That's carried. Reading of bylaws.
Point of order.
Oh,
There's-
sorry.
I have a motion.
Oh, it was the consent one. Sorry about that. Sorry, Councillor Littleton. We have the consent item that was lifted, and that was for to endorse. Okay, over to you, Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this has come about because I had a resident who contacted me who actually brought this up to my attention that next year is the year of the garden, and since it's the Garden City, he thought this might be a good initiative for the city and residents to get involved with. There are a lot of people in our city, as you know, who have gardens, and so I approached staff, and thanks to Director Christie and Eric, today they came back and said this is something that can be accommodated in their work plan, and so we have a motion before us. Council hasn't seen it, so if you'd like, I will read it.
Yes.
Okay, so it's whereas the Year of the Garden 2022 celebrates the centennial of Canada's horticultural sector, and whereas gardens and gardening contribute to the quality of life of our municipality and create safe and healthy places where people can come together, and whereas the Year of the Garden 2022 will highlight and celebrate the important contributions of gardeners, our local gardening organizations, horticultural professionals, and local horticultural businesses which contribute to garden culture and the experience garden of our municipality. Maybe we have a word there. And whereas gardens and gardening have helped us face the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas Communities in Bloom in collaboration with the Canadian Garden Council invites all municipalities to celebrate the Year of the Garden, therefore be it resolved that City Council hereby proclaims 2022 as the Year of the Garden in celebration of the contribution of gardens and gardening to the development of our country, our municipality, and the lives of our citizens in terms of health, quality of life, and environmental challenges. And be it further resolved that the Saturday before Father's Day, June 18th in 2022, be recognized as Garden Day in St. Catharines as a legacy of Canada's Year of the Garden 2022. And be it further resolved that St. Catharines is committed to be a garden-friendly city, supporting the development of its garden culture, and is proud to have the Trillium Awards that honor residents and organizations committed to making our neighborhoods more environmentally friendly, sustainable, and beautiful with creative landscaping, and continue to support and encourage both community gardens and pollinator gardens development throughout the city. And be it further resolved that all municipalities across Canada be invited to proclaim 2022 to be the Year of the Garden in their respective municipalities, and that a copy of this resolution be provided to the FCM and for that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Just in terms of the date for June 18th, is that so that we can start planting the gardens for the summertime?
Well, if you want spring bulbs, you have to plant now. Well, you should have already planted, but do your best, folks. That's all I can say.
Okay. Great initiative, by the way. Great initiative. Now, there's a band that sings In a Garden of Eden. Who's that band?
Iron Maiden, I think.
So Iron Maiden is one.
In the Garden of Eden.
So if we can proclaim that as the song for the garden in 2022. It's also in a Simpsons episode as well, just as a reference point. Thank you, Councillor. Any questions? Anyone who's had a gardening background, a career in gardening at some point? Anyone who wishes to post in? Okay, I think we'll just call the question. All in favor of this great initiative? I think it's... Who wants to?
I just need a seconder.
Councillor Kushner. I heard he's got a green
Does that
thumb.
include tomatoes, Mr. Mayor?
Pardon me?
Does that include vegetables?
Does it include community gardens?
Plant away, I say.
Okay, plant away, I say. That's a quote. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Looks like you'll be the team captain on this one. Bylaws, staff. If the alternative is, okay, whatever. That the bylaws listed on council agenda A through H be read a first time considered and passed, and that they be signed and executed by the mayor and city clerk. And so I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Phillips, Councillor Porter, all in favor? That's carried. Pardon me? That's the reading of the additional bylaw. So there's an additional bylaw that council authorized the sale of lands known as 230 Geneva Street to Pantera Group Limited. One reading with respect to the sale for the purpose of a proposed residential development to include market housing, affordable housing, and social housing. And so this is looking to Councillor Kushner, seconded by Councillor Townsend. All in favor? And that's carried. And then we have it would have been task force minutes. So we do have minutes of the task force. That council receive and file the minutes of the advisory committees of council. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Townsend, Councillor Phillips, all in favor? That's carried. We have a report request from Councillor Cisco. Councillor Cisco, you have a report request. Just want to throw it up quickly. Okay, so it's traffic calming options for Dufferin Street East. So looking for traffic calming options for Dufferin Street East. And any other reports requested? I'm not seeing any hands up. So that's that one. Any notices of motion for December 13th? That is our operating budget meeting as well. So that's December 13th. Not seeing anything. Make sure you get them in beforehand if you get a chance. For the members of the public, that will be the public meeting for the operating budget. So please pay attention to the operating budget. And if you have any comments, that'd be the great time to share them. And with that, I have a motion to adjourn. And a motion to adjourn, Councillor Phillips, Councillor Kushner, all in favor of adjournment. Everybody take care of yourself. Winter's here, so take your time on the roads as well. Take care, folks.